Climate change. What does it portend for the present and future? The universe is estimated to be approximately 14 billion years old. 4.3 billion years ago, the Earth was formed. Just as the human skin protects the body, the Earth has a thin blue line of atmosphere protecting it. This atmosphere is the result of gaseous exchanges and energy transmissions from the sun. The main gases in the atmosphere are nitrogen, oxygen, and argon. These are called non-greenhouse gases. These account for 99.9%. Water vapor, carbon dioxide, nitrous oxide, methane, and ozone make up the remaining 0.1%. These gases are called greenhouse gases. They are called greenhouse gases because they absorb and emit infrared radiation. This absorption of infrared light creates the greenhouse effect. Like a greenhouse, they easily allow ultraviolet light inside while poorly letting long-wave infrared light escape, thus increasing heat. This is the cause of global warming. Global warming has happened at least 7 times in the last 650,000 years, naturally alternating with ice ages. But these naturally occurring warming events happened over a period of 40,000 years, giving more time for adaptations and less upheaval. What the planet is experiencing at present is taking what occurred over a 40,000 year time period and compressing it into a dramatic 100-year process. The present climate change is global warming. At other periods of time, it has swung to cold. The difference this time is that the naturally occurring cycle of warming has been sped up by humans. It is estimated that the Earth's temperature has risen about 1 degree centigrade. This may not sound like much, but humans would have to leave the equatorial areas and tropics if it reached 2 points centigrade. It is not just the temperature that is causing alarm, but the speed at which this is occurring. What are the causes of our present problem? Our present day problem is caused by multiple factors. On the surface, an over-reliance on fossil fuels, with power plants and transportation accounting for 73% of the carbon dioxide emissions. Also, on the surface is the widespread use of industrial agriculture and livestock production, which accounts for a large amount of methane emitted. Yet, underneath both of these causes is the overall philosophy of materialism and mechanistic thinking, which gives rise to capitalism. It gives rise to non-indigenous socialism too. This worldview allows humans to approach life and all endeavors as commodities that can be exchanged and attached to monetary value. What can be seen, what can be felt, what is physically real, what is material. This has been occurring at different levels over the last 12,000 years. This worldview is in opposition to a formerly held philosophy or worldview that had predominated for up to 290,000 years, that was more integrative and acknowledged unseen and larger, more omnipresent forces. At present, the model that has propelled much of humanity into the present age has also created a situation where its way of life has threatened its own existence. The main culprits are an over-reliance on fossil fuels, deforestation, agriculture, and livestock production. Fossil fuels. Out of these, called Ancient Sunlight by Tom Hartman. The main source of fossil fuels is anaerobic decomposition of dead organisms that release energy upon combustion. The source of that energy is in 650 million-year-old processes of photosynthesis. The main forms that are used in industry and energy consumption are petroleum, coal, and natural gas. The problem with fossil fuel consumption is that they produce large amounts of CO2, or carbon dioxide, and carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas. Before the industrial era, it was estimated that the amount of carbon in the atmosphere was between 180 and 280 parts per million. 350 parts per million has been determined as the safe upper limit for our civilization. At present, the carbon dioxide parts per million sits at 410 parts per million, and it is steadily climbing. And it takes thousands of years to break down on its own. Because oil or petroleum is becoming increasingly more difficult to find, more desperate means are being employed to extract it. One of these, fracking, uses hundreds of billions of gallons of water to get a fraction of oil. One of the most recent and bitter struggles around Indigenous rights involves the tar sands oil fields in Alberta, Canada. Located on the Fort McKay's Nation's land, the fracking process uses 3 barrels of water to get 1 barrel of oil and has polluted the nearby rivers. Cancer rates have risen and air quality has diminished, as well as water quality. This is just one example of the devastating effect of utilizing fossil fuels. Deforestation. Every second, an entire acre of rainforest is being cut down. That is the size of a football field. It is being cut for its timber and to clear land for livestock and agriculture. Trees are one of our main ways of recapturing carbon, as trees utilize carbon dioxide in photosynthesis. It is estimated that every day up to 100 plant, animal, and insect species are being lost due to loss of habitat. Leading the fight against this destruction of the rainforest in the Amazon are the people most affected by its demise, the indigenous inhabitants. Yet, it is they who are being murdered for their activism. 1,100 have been murdered in the last 20 years. 91% of Amazon rainforest loss is due to either livestock or agriculture. Animal agriculture. While much of the attention has been on carbon dioxide and the use of fossil fuels, the issue of methane gets less attention. Animal agriculture produces more methane, also a greenhouse gas, than all of the carbon dioxide produced by the entire transportation industry combined: cars, trains, boats, planes. The livestock industry utilizes 34 trillion gallons of water a year, and the methane gas emitted from the flatulence of billions of domesticated animals is said to account for as much as 51% of today's climate change. But a focus on livestock production would entail a look at our meat consumption, and there are powerful political forces at work that make it challenging to question it. Each time the question of meat consumption arises and the extremely dangerous consequences of large-scale meat consumption on the planet brought up, lawsuits result. Yet, the facts state that just on water consumption alone, animal agriculture is extremely wasteful. 1 quarter-pound hamburger uses over 660 gallons of water to produce. 1 dozen eggs require 477 gallons of water, and a pound of cheese takes 900 gallons of water. 1 pound of hamburger meat takes up to 2,500 gallons of water to produce. Animal agriculture's production of nitrous oxide, the third most dangerous greenhouse gas, is said to be 296 times greater GWP, that's global warming potential, than carbon dioxide. Raising animals for food accounts for 30% of the water consumption. It occupies 45% of the Earth's land and responsible for 91% of the Amazon destruction. But few question this usage because lives are at stake, and the large meatpacking companies have the most aggressive lobbyists in Washington. What are the results of climate change and global warming? The results of climate change are vast and include global warming and sea level rise, extreme weather, pandemics, social unrest, planetary destruction, and the sixth extinction. Global warming and sea level rise. The first and most obvious result of climate change is the rising of the Earth's mean temperature. For thousands of years, it has hovered at or near 59 degrees Fahrenheit. This has caused a 1 degree centigrade temperature rise, and a 4-degree rise or more would be difficult to sustain human life in the middle parts of the world. If it rose 4 degrees, people would be forced to leave the equatorial regions entirely. Much of the world would be desert. The present rise in temperature has caused huge swaths of ice, 10 times the size of Manhattan, to drop off Antarctica and Greenland. The increased temperature has created droughts that have fueled and propelled huge forest fires. While 90% of the forest fires are human caused, the dry conditions and extreme heat escalates the degree of danger from lightning. More than 10.3 million acres in 2020, compared with 4.7 million in 2019, were due to lightning, destroying 10,500 structures in California and killing 31 people. Several entire island nations and many coastal cities are in jeopardy as sea levels rise. Kiribati and the Marshall Islands in the Pacific Ocean and the Maldives Islands in the Indian Ocean have already had to move people to higher terrain because of rising seas. Extreme weather. Heat waves in Sweden, droughts in South Africa, flooding in Bangladesh, and more frequent and stronger tornadoes in the Midwest and hurricanes in the Caribbean are examples of extreme weather that has been occurring more frequently and in greater intensity. In a study reviewing 405 extreme weather events, 70% were made worse by human-caused climate change. Out of 81 studies looking at flooding and extreme rainfall, 58% were found to be made worse by climate change, 65% for drought. Human involvement is in 92% of extreme heat occurrences. 506 of the 735 fatalities during a heat wave in Paris in 2003 were due to human-caused climate change impacting it. 64 of the 315 deaths in the London heat wave was impacted by human-caused climate change. Epidemics and pandemics. Epidemics and pandemics have been occurring since the dawn of civilization 12,000 years ago. They were not as prevalent in the 290,000 or more years prior. Yet, the current proliferation of deadly infectious disease is at an all-time high due to the environmental impacts of human-caused climate change. While ancient scourges such as smallpox, typhoid, yellow fever, tuberculosis, diphtheria, leprosy, and venereal disease are on the decline or have been eliminated, there have been an increase in new viruses that can affect humans. SARS, SARS-CoV-2, MERS, Ebola, AIDS have all appeared in the last 40 years. Being zoonoses, or diseases that have been contracted from our contact with animals, the rapid deforestation of the forest leads to increased spread of disease. In the case of our most recent pandemic, COVID-19, bats who were stressed by habitat destruction transmitted the novel virus to exotic animals, pangolins in particular. When bats are stressed, they do not generate enough heat to kill new viruses, and habitat destruction is stressful to bats. And because livestock and animal agriculture, forests are being eliminated at a fast rate. This also brings animals and humans closer in proximity, and where bushmeat or wild game is sold in open live markets, virus transmission is highly probable. Water pollution. While water pollution is not a direct result of climate change, it is a result of the collective lifestyle of excess that has caused climate change. There are almost 2 billion people worldwide without clean drinking water. Meanwhile, people in the West waste water. The average Californian uses 1,500 gallons of water per day. Half of that 1,500 is comprised of the water used to produce meat and dairy. Both are water intensive because the animals use a lot of water and eat grains that use a great deal of water as well. This is called the virtual water footprint. And the main polluter of our oceans, seas, lakes, and rivers is plastic, a product from petroleum-based chemicals. In the southern Gear, off the coast of Peru in the eastern Pacific, is a conglomeration of small plastic shards twice the size of Texas. China, Indonesia, the Philippines, Vietnam, Sri Lanka, and Thailand dump more plastic in the sea than all other countries combined. China alone accounts for 30% of worldwide plastic ocean pollution. Social unrest or enhanced oppression. Climate change is extremely disruptive to societies. If water is in short supply, with fires raging, hurricanes causing floods, and destruction is prevalent, their impact on oppressed and distressed communities is enhanced. In her incendiary book, Shock Doctrine: The Rise of Disaster Capitalism, Naomi Klein explains how during environmental and terrorist disasters, capitalist forces consolidate power by instituting measures deemed draconian at other times. We must remember that the Patriot Act was instituted right after 9/11. And it's very interesting that Mark Clark and Fred Hampton were killed at the same time that they had the trial for the Chicago 7. The social unrest instigated by climate change disasters is due to the fact that climate change deepens inequity. If communities of color, indigenous societies, LGBTQ communities, the poor, immigrants, and the disabled are discriminated against normal times, it is increased during times of emergencies because that requires resources, and those communities have less resources to begin with. During Hurricane Katrina, which devastated New Orleans in 2005, the whole world witnessed how the poor were mistreated, not rescued, and not cared for during times of need. Over 1,100 people died, virtually all poor and Black, and thousands have been displaced and never able to move back. If anything, climate change exposes the contradictions of materialist society, focused more on GDP and conspicuous consumption than its citizens' welfare. Planetary destruction. In addition to extreme weather, climate change and global warming cause catastrophic changes to the Earth. The cryosphere, or planetary frozen water, is melting, decreasing the Earth's reflective power and leaving more ocean exposed. Because of its relative darkness, the ocean absorbs heat. Along with increased warmth, the oceans are expanding due to rising sea levels. Because at least 1/3 of all carbon dioxide emissions end up in the oceans have become more acidic. The acidification kills coral, and the hotter water stresses and kills the algae that nourishes it. Human life suffers as well. Climate change threatens agriculture because it is more difficult for farmers to predict weather patterns. Crop yields are often destroyed by extreme weather. Warmer, more polluted air damages lungs and triggers attacks of asthma and bronchitis. Heat increases ground level ozone, which added to particulate matter is smog. Climate change is destroying Arctic ice, which is needed for walruses, polar bears, and other mammals. In 2008, the polar bear became the first animal listed on the endangered species list due to global warming. The sixth extinction. What it all comes down to is this: climate change in the form of global warming threatens life on Earth, bringing in what Elizabeth Colbert calls the sixth extinction. In her book, The Sixth Extinction, An Unnatural History, Colbert describes in detail how we are presently in the midst of a sixth planetary extinction and are in denial about it. She predicts, based on present rates of extinction, that by the year 2100, up to between 20% and 50% of all living things will be extinct. As it is presently going, humanity will be on that list too, and the lives of our grandchildren and their children will be threatened. Human behavior has vastly disrupted the Earth's previously balanced, interconnected systems. Because of humans' ability to adapt and change, they also have a greater potential to alter the planet, especially if they approach it non-holistically. Through disrupting the global atmosphere, water cycle, ocean's heat absorption ability, ocean acidity, decreased soil moisture, and causing excessive heat stressing plants, insects, and animals, the Earth is at a precipice. With carbon dioxide rising and the presently at levels higher than in several million years, humanity has some serious decisions to make. Will the capitalist nations, along with China and Russia, drastically reduce their dependence on fossil fuels? Will they continue to raise and domesticate animals? Will the rich continue to sequester profits and profit off of disaster? Solutions. While humans only use 5% of the water in homes, reducing one's water footprint is important. There are ways one can take personal responsibility, knowing still that the real source of the problem are the policies and practices of the large corporations, governments, and military installations. Some of the personal changes include switching to 1.1 gallon toilets, turning the water off while we brush our teeth, taking shorter showers, riding bikes, recycling, home gardening, and buying used clothes. One of the most effective and efficient ways to make a personal difference is to become vegan. That means eliminating meat, dairy, and eggs. It is estimated that by changing one's diet to vegan, one produces half of their yearly carbon dioxide, uses 1/4 as much oil, 1/12 as much water, and 1/18 as much land. By being vegan, one person saves 1,100 gallons of water, 44 pounds of grain, 30 square feet of forested land, 10 pounds of carbon dioxide, and one animal's life every day. Other personal things one can do include weatherizing one's home. Low flow showers and repairing all plumbing problems can serve as well. On a community level, planting bamboo, tree intensification, seaweed farming, composting, establishing peat lands, and a plant-rich diet all capture carbon effectively. One of the most effective strategies for capturing carbon or carbon dioxide is to have more green. And the best way to do that is to plant trees, reforestation. People in Senegal know this to be true. In their efforts to hold off the arid Sahel, community members in St. Louis, Senegal area united 35 villages to help form Gen Sen, Global Eco Villages Network of Senegal. Gen Sen began planting trees and returned to eating the available fruits that were in season as opposed to importing. In Kenya and around the world, Nobel Prize winner Wangari Maathai for years led the Green Belt movement, planting trees around the world. South Korea may be the model for nations. It has embarked on an aggressive reforesting program since the Korean War devastation. In some regions, entire mountains have been reforested. Water sustainability. In the documentary Brave Blue World, several solutions for water sustainability were highlighted. One, called a water box, is a portable water distillation unit. It is ideal for poor and remote communities. Another, developed by Beth Kioji in Thika, Kenya, utilizes the humidity in the air to make what she calls magic water. It uses the same biomimetic principles of the Nanamia beetle, which has water attracting characteristics utilizing the same idea. The Dutch Grand Alliance developed a hydro loop, which allows the same water to be used over and over within one's household. They use the same water to wash, swim in, flush the toilet, and drink. It is estimated to save 3,000 liters a month, over 30,000 a year. It is said that in 10 years, if only 5% of the world's people looped and practiced in-house residential recycling, it would stop excessive water uptake on Earth. Regenerative agriculture. Another proposed and presently employed solution is regenerative agriculture. It does have some controversy in its animal husbandry practices, however, in that it still advocates eating beef and chicken, but only grass-fed. Through regenerative practices, the soil is untilled, which holds more water and draws down more carbon. It focuses on soil health, planting cover crops, reducing or eliminating chemicals, and minimizing runoff that created dead zones like the one in the Gulf of Mexico. Planting in this way lessens the need for clearing more land because existing plots will yield more food. The future. The most vivid image of the future consequences of climate change are renditions of cities like New York, London, Hong Kong, and other coastal cities under 50 feet or more of water. However, before it gets to that state, the interim could be episodically devastating. It is going to demand of humanity a higher level of environmental, political, and spiritual consciousness to grapple with all of the implications of climate change. The first challenge for humanity is to accept the science that there is only one race of humans on the planet, Homo sapiens. Racism will have to be conquered. To face the environmental disasters and the economic, political, and cultural crises resulting from it, people all over the world will be forced to work together, sometimes in life and death situations. It will also demand that we reevaluate our superiority complex as regards other species and life forms. We may be forced to approach life more like indigenous societies with more respect, reverence, and sense of gratitude. And we will have to model political systems that become more horizontal, egalitarian, borderless, and holistic. Racism, sexism, gender bias, classism, speciesism, and religious oppression must all be overcome. Ultimately, it would demand that humanity rids itself of its fixation to control, manipulate, and exploit nature. We are part of a superorganism. That was by Dr. Bruce Hood. What this means, what happens to one happens to all. Thank you. This was a pretty vast subject, as you can imagine. So there's a number of references. These are the books and articles, just a few that I've read. This is something I've been looking at, reading over and looking at for at least 20 years. So I just did some updating. These are some of the films, just a few of the films that I watched just for this. There's a lot of other films over the years that I have watched around this. I don't claim to still be an expert on this, but at the same time, I do understand the urgency of the moment. And I feel like everybody, no matter what our movement or our issue is, even if it's identity politics, we have to incorporate some aspect of climate change into our analysis at this point. Otherwise, we are in denial. Thank you.